Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming out today. My name is Matt Sinovic. I'm the Executive Director of Progress Iowa. And we are very proud today to host the Nuns on the Bus, featuring Sister Simone Campbell, the Executive Director of Network Lobby. We're here today to do a one-day, three-stop tour across the state on the bus, along with Sister Simone is here, along with her fellow Catholic sisters. We'll be holding public events here in Des Moines, in Mason City, and in Waterloo to talk about the Romney-Ryan budget, as well as issues of poverty and health care that are affecting our state and affecting folks across the country. Before I introduce Sister Jeannie Hagedorn, one housekeeping item for the folks who are going to be tweeting or posting about this. We're tweeting at the hashtag NOTBIA. It's Nuns on the Bus Iowa. So please tweet and post and share statistics. If you don't have one of these flyers, feel free to pick one up. It has all of the stats about how the Romney-Ryan budget hurts Iowans. Things like cutting Head Start by $15 million, 329,000 fewer Iowans on receiving health care through Medicaid. So feel free to tweet those numbers, those statistics throughout the day with the hashtag NOTBIA. Well, I have the pleasure to introduce the person who's going to introduce Sister Simone. And she has been absolutely terrific as we've been planning this day of events. Sister Jeannie Hagedorn, of the Sisters of Humility here, and she, one of the reasons that this room is so full is because of her and her terrific work. So with that, I will pass it over to her. Thanks, Sister.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be able to introduce Simone this morning. I don't think she really needs an introduction to many of you who are familiar with the Nuns on the Bus, because in their travels across the country, the Catholic sisters have been trying to be a voice for those who have no voice, and especially for those who are kind of pushed to the margins of our society. Simone brings a deep faith, a huge, generous heart, and a strong commitment to social justice. She also brings her professional experience as an attorney, as and the Executive Director of Network, the Catholic Social Justice Lobby in D.C. She is a fearless advocate for those who need a voice. You have probably seen and heard her speak at the Democratic National Convention. She speaks to Congress up on the Hill. She has spoken to the President. She comes with endless energy and courage. Even coming from the devastated East Coast last night, she arrived and is headed on after today. I'd like to just briefly share with you an email that I received last night from a couple Iowans who are in this room today. And I think it gives evidence of the hope that Sister Simone and the Catholic sisters are trying to bring to our country in such a divided time. Dear sisters, we would like to be included in your Thursday activities, all of them if you have room for us. My husband has multiple sclerosis, and your mission is important to him and a great many others. We are inspired by your living testament of faith in action and would like to be part of it. Thank you, Joe. So, this is All Saints Day. We're not going to canonize Simone yet. Getting close. I would just like to, before I introduce her, on a personal note, say, yes, Elaine and I are Sisters of Humility, but we are very proud to call Simone our friend. Sister Simone Campbell.
back in Iowa. Earlier I told some of the folks here that we started our bus trip on June 17th here. And my lack of education was I knew we were going to Ames because we wanted to go to Steve King's office up there, his campaign office. But my ignorance, I'm a Californian and I live in DC, so I do coasts. I don't do centers as well. I had no idea that you had to fly to Des Moines to get to Ames. And so, but the great joy of my life has been getting to know you all a little bit and to have a return visit here, even just for a day, to be here is just a wonderful treat. And I think it's a real treat because the piece that I've discovered on the bus in June and early July was everybody would say, oh, thank you for coming, thank you for coming. And I said, oh no, thank you for coming. I mean, we just are on a bus and, educating folks about what's happening in DC that people didn't know about. And here's all the folks who are doing the hard work of making our nation a better nation, a more perfect union, as our Constitution says. But then I realized as a person of faith, when one crowd is telling us thank you, and we're going, oh no, thank you, and you spend about 5 minutes going back and forth on the thank yous, I began to realize, isn't that community? When you see the giftedness of the other, and you see that gift so strongly that you kind of lose sight of your own. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm glad you see us as you see me as gift. That's really great. But we're here today in Iowa because, well, as y'all know, probably something's happening next Tuesday. You may have heard about this. I'm not sure if you have any time for anything else on your television for any programs these days. I know in DC, when we have power, it's wall-to-wall ads. But we're on the road today because we want to lift up a core piece of who we are as a nation that's lost. And that is that the proposal that we are a nation based on individualism is not true. I'm beginning to call it an unpatriotic lie that we're individualistic. And the fact is, if you look at our Constitution, the first 3 words tells us who we are. It's we the people. A democracy cannot be based on individualism because a democracy is all about people coming together to solve the tough problems of their time. And this idea that we can just individually go it alone, it quite frankly only works for those that have enough money to insulate themselves from any adverse shock. And the fact is, in our nation, there's at least 80% of us that struggle every day to make a go of it. And who we've met on the bus and who we've lifted up have been hard-working Americans. It's shocking to me that folks can work for minimum wage and still be in poverty. In Milwaukee, some of you have heard my story about Billy and his wife, who we met at the St. Benedict the Moore dining room in downtown Milwaukee. And Billy's hours had been cut back. He and his wife were working, but their family qualified for food stamps. He was able to feed his kids with food stamps. But even that, food stamps aren't enough. All of his salary was going to rent. Just because the rent in a big city is really expensive. And so what he knew was with food stamps, they could put food on the table. And in the evening, every evening, they go to St. Benedict's dining room. Because as he told me, growing kids, and one of his kids was 14, and you could tell he was just at that voracious age where they eat everything in sight. Billy told me that parents can get by with 2 meals a day, but growing kids can't. And so what they did was go there to be able to put food on the table. I talked with Paul Ryan after we got back from the bus, and his program, his proposal, his budget wants to cut food stamps for people like Billy and his family. And he says, I told him the story of Billy, and he said, well, they're not the targets. They're not the targets. I mean, he may be working, but they're not the targets. But my response was, they're going to be the victims of a policy that does not understand how hard it is in our nation to earn a living, when minimum wage is at $7.25 an hour. When in 1970, the equivalent minimum wage would be $12.50 today to have the same buying power. as it did in 1970. Yes, we have more working poor people, but it's because we haven't raised minimum wage. We've chosen instead as a nation to create a safety net. But what I'm realizing is this safety net we can look at as a handout, which some politicians want to tell you, that it's a handout that creates dependency. That's outrageous. The fact is people are dependent on eating. Hello. But the challenge is that maybe it's creating dependence on the part of the employer of paying low wages. Maybe it's creating dependence on the part of us consumers who pay low prices. Maybe it's creating dependence on a nation by a nation who thinks that we can get by without paying just wages, enough to support a family outside of poverty. It's all of us together that need to examine and say, how do we move forward? But until we have an alternative, people need to eat. And so we stand with Billy and his family. And that we have an alternative. Now, you don't see the blood, sweat, and tears on the paper. I thought we ought to do the cover in red because so much effort went into this, and I thought we would never get here. But Paul Ryan says that the only way forward is his proposal because the deficit's bad. The deficit is bad. We have to pay attention. We have to get our financial house in order. But what we know in the interfaith community is we came together and we said we're going to create an alternative. It's hard work. We had fights. Faith people fighting, it's always interesting. And, because you say, oh, well, now I don't want to say anything too negative, but, and then, when the but comes, you get something really negative. Well, we had a lot of fights in this, and on the very last night, I was on the email till like 12:30 at night, trying to get this done. But it's a faithful budget. It's a faithful budget as an alternative way forward. The faithful budget is 55 pages of detail, but it boils down to 5 words. What we need is reasonable revenue for responsible programs. Any politician wants to tell you right now, oh, wait, they won't raise taxes. Quite frankly, they're nuts. There is no way to cut our way out of this deficit because you know what? It was tax cuts that created some of this problem. Many of us in this room are old enough, you can tell by our gray hairs, well earned, I might add, that in the 2000 election, the big question was, what did we do with our budget surplus? And we decided to give huge tax cuts. Small ones to the middle class, huge ones to the ones at the top. And then what we decided was to wage 2 wars and not pay for them. I find it abhorrent, I find it shocking, I find it viscerally painful that we asked our men and women in uniform to put themselves in harm's way, and we as a nation did nothing to pay for it, to support them. We did things to support them personally, but not as a nation. We did not pay for those wars. We put it on a credit card, and now we're surprised we have to pay for it. That's where the problem came from. We need to be responsible as a nation. We need to pay our just debts now. It is true we shouldn't pass it on to our next generation. I was going to say children, but I don't have any because I'm a Catholic sister. But what we need to do is we cannot let the children of the next generation pay our responsibilities. So we need to raise revenue. Let's be real. And then we need responsible programs. Every place we went, we saw social service programs run by Catholic sisters that did fabulous work where they take federal money, a little bit of federal money, and they leverage it. Nuns are really good at this. At getting donations, volunteers, corporations, foundations, putting the whole thing together to create fabulously responsible programs. And what I found in our 2-week bus trip and since then is everywhere Catholic sisters do 3 glorious things. They create relationship, they create community, and they create beauty wherever they are. And that creates a real whole responsible program that builds up community in low-income neighborhoods. But we believe that all programs funded by the government should be responsible. The Pentagon should be responsible. They should be as concerned about their expenditures as effective use of our tax money as social service programs are. The Commerce Department, State Department, Housing and Urban Development, all of the departments, Department of Justice, all need to be responsible because in tough economic times, everybody needs to be accountable. And quite frankly, the Defense Department, the Pentagon, is growing larger than anybody else. And I think if we're looking for places where we might be able to find some savings, it's there. So responsible programs are the way forward with reasonable revenue. And one final point. We're also on this trip because the Affordable Care Act needs to be fully implemented. The Affordable Care Act has a lot of political sound bites out there, and most of it's scary. Ooh. And we just passed Halloween, maybe that's why. But the fact is, the Affordable Care Act, it's not the perfect bill. We actually lobbied for a different one, but it's better than what we've got. We've already seen the benefits of the Affordable Care Act, but the part we care about most is the full implementation of the Medicaid expansion. Because the Medicaid expansion is the key way to get services to low-income adults who don't have children in the home. To expand it to 133% of poverty is the way forward. And why I care so much about this is because of Margaret. Margaret Kistler died because she did not have health care. She died at age 56 because she'd lost her job and she did not have enough money to buy health insurance, even with COBRA coverage. She was, her family has colon cancer in their family. They know they've got a marker gene, but she could not get the diagnostic treatment because she didn't have the money. She died unnecessarily. This is wrong. This is not a pro-life stance that we as a nation allow people to die without health care. So Margaret's become my icon. Her sisters, Jeannie and Lynn, brought her picture to me in Cincinnati at our fundraiser when we were on the bus in June. And since then, I've carried her picture in my Bible, and every day she becomes the source of my prayer and my inspiration. We, the people of the United States, can form a more perfect union. We can expand healthcare coverage. We can make sure that all poor people have access to healthcare. We can do the pro-life stand. We're not bankrupt. The richest nation on earth is not bankrupt, let me tell you. What we're bankrupt in is political will. And that's why we're calling on Iowans, we're calling on we, the people of the United States, to form this more perfect union and to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, but promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And the only way forward is reasonable revenue for responsible programs and people like Margaret won't die. Thank you.